Good afternoon, everybody. We would like to welcome you to our second ASLA Emerging Professionals Committee Ask Me Anything event. We've got an exciting day today. We have a very, very special guest, and we will introduce him shortly. But I want to thank you all for joining us. Sorry we got started a little bit late. We had a few technical difficulties, but everything is worked out now, and we are good to go. So thank you very much for joining us. On behalf of the ASLA Emerging Professionals Committee, once again, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to a fellow committee member, Amy Severson, and she's going to introduce our special guest. Amy?
Hello. Yes, thank you very much. So Kona Gray is principal of EDSA. As a principal with over 23 years of experience, Kona Gray has been involved in many planning and landscape architectural projects, ranging from large-scale master planning to detailed site design since he joined EDSA in 1997. Blending sensitivity and context with a passion for creative design solutions is paramount to his approach. Kona has a keen ability to take a client's vision and long-range views and create programs with purpose, priorities, and physical presence. He consistently takes into consideration such factors as site heritage, history, community, interface, implementation strategies, and each property's unique cultural, physical, and environmental characteristics. He has been instrumental to reintroducing EDSA to the higher education and healthcare market with campus master plans and teaching hospitals in the US, Dubai, and Qatar. His international experience has also involved the management of a design team for 3 major mixed-use resort communities in Egypt and Morocco. Currently, Kona is leading a team of design professionals on projects in Florida, Virginia, China, the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, St. Lucia, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, and Egypt. Welcome, Kona.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for the introduction. That was wonderful. And thanks, Daniel, for putting this all together. I'm really happy to be a part of this process.
Absolutely. We are glad you are here. We know that you are always a huge hit with the students and emerging professionals, speaking, 3 times at LaBash now in the last 4 years or so. So we're excited that you joined us. We're going to get things started. We already have some questions coming in from viewers, which is awesome. But we're going to throw some questions at you that we kind of have in the can for these occasions to get a feel for where you are and what you think is going on in the profession. So I want to start off and ask a question that, looking back at students and where they're going in their future, in your career, who or what even has had the biggest impact on your career and guiding where you've gone in your career?
That's a great question. I think I'd have to start with my parents. They've had the most amazing impact on me, on who I am and what I do, and the type of person I've always wanted to be. And that's because my parents were always nurturing. They always cared about the things that I was trying to do, and always made sure that I was on the right track. And so I think it's important for all emerging professionals to really take note of the people in their lives that are really doing the things that they need to allow them to be successful. My dad is an architect, and he's still practicing at 75 years old in West Africa and Liberia. And he's technically advanced. He still draws by hand. He does everything. So he's quite an inspiration for what I do. On the professional side, though, I've been very fortunate to have had some really amazing mentors. First and foremost, Ed Stone was just a consummate gentleman. I'm in Ed's office right now. It's our library here at EDSA now, and it's just it's hallowed ground. It's a place that really makes a lot of us feel special about this place. Since 1960, the organization being established, and then along with Ed, Joe Lally, our former chairman, he really taught me everything I know about landscape architecture. Joe was the principal in charge of my design studio, so I worked with Joe for over 17 years and really learned a lot from him. So I would say that those people are really the ones that have shaped my career.
Great, thank you. You were talking about your parents. I was going to follow up and ask what they thought when you first said you wanted to become a landscape architect, but then you went into your dad being an architect, so he probably had a little better idea than some of the students who are starting off and their parents like, you want to do what?
Yeah, yeah, he had a better idea, but I initially wanted to be an architect. I'm a painter too, so I started out in fine art, and so I ended up in art school initially right out of high school, and I kept gravitating and hanging out with the architects. And so he kept telling me, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't become an architect. It's, you work a lot of hard hours, and there's not a lot of reward, and you got to really, really love it." And but one thing led to another, and I followed his path.
Awesome. Next question. If you had some magic time machine and you could go back to when you were first coming out of school and starting off, what would you go back and tell yourself?
That's a great question. So I know hindsight's 2020, and we all wish we had that. I took the long road to attain my degree. I actually worked all the way through school. It was funny when I was going and applying to colleges. I found out that my sister essentially depleted the college fund. So my parents said, "Okay, buddy, time to get a loan, and you might have to work a few jobs too to make ends meet." So I think going back, I would tell myself, to be very patient and look at all these opportunities as positive opportunities, even if they're negative. There were times when I got down about things, but it really, I was lucky enough to just keep pushing, and I'm glad I did. I wouldn't be here today, and it's sort of a chance happening that I actually fell into landscape architecture, similar to many emerging professionals and professionals. I just had an opportunity to transfer. I missed the deadline, and a good friend of mine encouraged me to check out a program at the University of Georgia, and I did it, and the rest is history.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
What, since you found it and now you're in the career, what do you think the best thing about being a landscape architect is? What do you love the most about it?
It's so funny. I think that a lot of people underestimate our abilities. I'm sure many of you have had to explain to parents and relatives and people you meet on the street exactly what a landscape architect does. And I just think it's probably the best profession in the world because we touch so many aspects of design and environment and science, philosophy. Everything about landscape architecture is pretty cool. And I think the best thing that I've started to gather throughout my time here at EDSA is the ability to sort of bring groups together, bring people together, and design with a purpose. So that at the end of the day, we're typically the ones who are bringing everyone together and making things happen. And I just think that's extremely rewarding. It builds a lot of great relationships because you're making friends, not enemies. And it allows you to continue to do what you love doing in a positive way. So I think that's the best thing about landscape architecture. We're so well-rounded, we can pretty much do anything.
Yeah, that seems to be, seems like landscape architects are kind of at a key point right now with the green build and things that are going on, where instead of being the last or first people here, they're kind of setting the pace and using that ability to engage stakeholders and to get everybody together. I think you're right on. That is a great aspect. And you mentioned in there some skills and traits, like that ability to talk to people and bring people together. But what other skills and traits do you think is important for a landscape architect to have?
Well, I think a good understanding of the environment and our planet, things that are really important that many others take for granted. I think it's sort of our responsibility as stewards of the land to teach and to push the envelope and to make sure that everyone we touch gets an understanding of the contribution we're making and the reasons why we're making that contribution. It's pretty easy to kind of forget things and take them for granted, and I just feel that that's the power of a landscape architect, is having that knowledge and that professional experience to be able to share with people and be that voice of reason, so they say, "Oh, we get it. There's a reason why we need to do this." So I think that's a very important characteristic.
Excellent. Let's go ahead and jump to one of our viewer questions here. This person I think you might know, Mr. Daniel Rodriguez from the University of Florida. I think he just did an internship with you guys recently. Daniel asks, with technology and the desire to change the world pulling students in so many directions, it's hard to find what skills I need or things I really need to know when looking for a job. What should I really focus on while I am in school?
That's a great question, Daniel, and I'm sure you know from your internship here at EDSA, you need to be well-rounded. It's okay to focus on one aspect or another, but it's not giving you the opportunity to do many things and stay fresh. And as you're saying, technology is changing every day, so you got to keep up. But you can't lose sight of sort of the principles of design. So, we really think it's important, and I personally agree that, you really have to be a designer at heart. You have to really love design. You have to think about it all the time and draw when you can and read magazines that are about design and just little things that keep you fresh, because I think at the end of the day, landscape architects are driven by design. I mean, we are a design profession. So I think that's really, one of those aspects you got to keep in mind all the time.
Excellent. Passion for what you do. Do what you love and it'll reward you.
Always.
Definitely. All right, next question, a viewer question from Alicia Adams. Alicia says, I see that Studio Gray is working to expand EDSA's presence in the Caribbean and Africa. What are some of the cultural differences in design that you have observed, and what landscape architecture in these environments?
Great question, Alicia. So, we've been an international company since 1960, and we've worked in all sorts of places, and the majority of us were born here in the States. So it's important for you to really have an understanding of where you're designing. And culturally, we're just one aspect of the world. And things that I've learned from living in Africa and growing up there are very dear and near to me, and really have grounded me in sort of the respect for the way people live. I think ultimately it comes back to designing for people. So if you're designing for people, you need to design for their culture. Whether we're designing in the Middle East, or if we're designing in Asia, or if we're designing in Africa, we have to put on a different hat based on that set of circumstances. So in the Caribbean, it's pretty amazing to see how it's such a melting pot of cultures, especially in places like Trinidad and Tobago and St. Lucia and Cuba. I mean, there's just people from all over the world just embracing each other. And it seems to be that in other parts of the world, there's less misunderstanding about differences, and I find that very very healthy. And my hope is that here in the U.S. we do the same thing from as much as we can as we grow, because it's really what makes the countries unique, is that aspect of understanding each other and working with each other's cultures.
Do you have a favorite place that you've worked with?
I do. I had a wonderful opportunity to work with a client from Dubai on that really was doing a lot of development in that part of the region of the world. And I may have mentioned this before in one of my talks, but the Maldives is still one of my favorite places. It's a series of volcanic islands, atolls out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and it's super cool. It is probably one of the most amazing, I call it, oceanscape/landscapes in the world. It's just amazing to see how people there really embrace what they have. I mean, they don't have a lot, and they are very, very happy. They live within their means. They live in sort of a fishing society because they're surrounded by water. And the land that they have is precious, and they take very good care of it. So I think that that's one of the most inspirational places I've been in my life.
That sounds awesome. I've seen several of your presentations and amazing pictures and stuff, and you always have your travel pictures in there mixed in with your project pictures. You can tell you love exploring the world, like a sense of wanderlust. Has that always been something you've been into, or is that something that kind of grew as you got into the work?
No, I've always been in living in really cool to meet world. I actually went to primary schools from Sweden and the UK and all over from all parts, Australia. So I've always had that bug for understanding people from around the world.
All right, that actually ties into our next user question too. UGG Davis asks, how has your cultural background and racial identity affected your work, where you choose to work, or the type of work you choose to do?
Very good questions. Very good questions. I think African heritage is something I really feel is important. I think that everyone, wherever you're from, you should be very proud of your heritage. It's basically what makes you who you are. And I think that it's really allowed me to sort of focus on places and designs and types of work that I really think are important to me culturally and philosophically. So it's one of those things that makes you consider the places that you're going and why you're doing what you're doing, because otherwise you really don't have any compass. And I think that morally you want to be in places and do things that are positive. So why do something in a place where you don't want to be? So it's kind of a common sense thing for me, but I think that the types of projects I've done here at EDSA have been really based on sort of my point of view in terms of the world.
All right. What kind of projects are you working on right now? What's on the table?
We're on the table right now. It's a leading project in Morocco. We have very aggressive. They're moving quickly, and it's quite a bit of land that we're working with, over 4,000 acres. So it's something that takes time, and there's a lot of back and forth. So it's really rewarding. I think the best thing about the project is its site. It's located in a valley. There's a beautiful river that's adjacent to it. And I think the next thing about it is the people that really take care of that site. We've incorporated a lot of the local culture into the aspects of the project. I think there's a lot of life lessons when you're working on large-scale projects, and one of those is sort of balancing your client's desires with your desires and point of view as a designer, as well as the desires and point of view of the people you're designing for. So it's challenging. One of the aspects of the components of the project is golf. I love golf, but golf also takes up a lot of land. It can be something that's not very sustainable. But we fortunately have been able to obtain the best golf course architect, Nicholas, and he's allowing us to do something that's really great. It's sustainable. We're hoping that it'll be an Audubon certified course. It's going to be a greenway for birds and other types of creatures, so that we're not taking away everything from the environment. Other things that are on the boards include smaller projects. We're doing a really neat private residence right now, and it's the challenging aspect of that is that it's we're working with an HOA, a homeowners association, so they're in every decision and wanting to know what's happening. Fortunately, our clients are very understanding, and they get it, and we're really going to end up with something pretty cool for them.
What's the same and what's different in those projects when you're talking about a scale of one is hundreds of acres to a private residence? Obviously, that seems like two completely different products. What's the same and what's different?
I think that's the best thing about because as architects we can translate, and typically what's the same is you're dealing with a client. You're typically dealing with a client, and you have to be a very good steward of their resources. You have to be able to get along. You have to really be able to translate what they're trying to do in a manner that is feasible. And I think that's the one thing that really makes our profession unique, because no offense to other professions, but we've worked with many other allied professionals that are really, it's all about them and not about the project and about the client. So I think that's the most important thing. Like you said, the most different thing is the scale. I mean, it's just completely different. We're talking about a 5,000 square foot terrace versus a 4,000 acre property. So it's a big difference in scale.
I can't even imagine. That's it makes the day exciting when you got something different to look at every day. That's good.
Yeah, we love it. Love it.
We have another question from a viewer. Stephen Panaski asks, at what point did you feel like, or did you notice yourself really hitting your stride as a designer, where you felt as though you had a niche either in your company or the field or landscape architecture overall, and how do you think you got to that point?
Great question, Stephen. So my first assignment at EDSA was a design assignment on a resort project, and basically our chief in charge, Joe Lally, stepped into the studio and asked several of us to take a portion of the project. And my portion was to develop these bungalows, which I've never had done anything like that in my life. So fortunately, I stepped away from my desk after a few hours of scratching my head and got help, which was fantastic. I think one of the things that I find very unique about what we do is the ability to sort of translate those small lessons into something bigger. And I've always wondered when I would figure out, is this really what I want to do? I essentially gave myself 2 years here at EDSA. So 18 years later, I'm here. I'm a principal. I'm running my own design studio. It was probably about 4 years ago where I figured out, okay, this is really comfortable. I wasn't, worried. I was, confident about what I had to do. I think the first lesson I had that really made me get a little bit of confidence to get into that stride was Joe and I were supposed to go to a meeting together, and at the last minute, he had to cancel. But the client needed to see someone, and Joe said, "You got it." And so I stepped into this boardroom of all these very, very important CEOs to discuss our master plan, and it was extremely intimidating. But the one thing I learned many, many years ago was to just always rely on the people you know and use them as leverage as you're growing and as you're providing services. And so I simply stated that Joe and I have been working on this plan for quite some time, and here are some of the things that we feel are important about it. And so instead of it being about me, it was about we. It's a collective opportunity, and I believe that as designers, you're not doing it by yourself. And so I had instant credibility because of that experience, and I think that you really need to take that to heart as a designer. Make sure that you're soaking up as much knowledge from your mentors, use them as references, make sure that you're teaching as you're designing. It just allows you to become more confident along the way. And if you can explain your design to someone that knows nothing about your design, it just makes you that much better as a designer.
All right, thank you. I know that you are heavily involved with the Landscape Architecture Foundation, and they're doing great work in the industry and helping landscape architecture. Talk a little bit about your involvement there and that organization.
So EDSA is with the LAF since 1970. Ed Stone served as a board member for many years, and then he passed the torch on to Joe Lally. And then after that, Joe passed it on to Greg Sutton, a designer that I basically grew up with here at EDSA. We both started around the same time. And then Greg introduced me to the LAF. And even when I was in college, I'd get a little card every once in a while in the mail to give to the Landscape Architecture Foundation. So I said, well, who are these people? Because I really didn't know anything about the organization. And I did a little bit of research and realized that it was Ian McCarg and many of his colleagues that started it. Ian spoke at Georgia around the same time I realized who the LAF was. And I still have one of his books that's autographed, and it's pretty amazing to understand what an important organization it is. So last year I was fortunate enough to receive the opportunity to be the president-elect of the LAF as a board member for a year, and then stepping into this role as president-elect, and it has been extremely rewarding. I've been able to meet a lot of wonderful people. Even Joe mentioned that to me many years ago. He said, if you take advantage of these organizations that are affiliated with your profession, it allows you to be a stronger designer, allows you to network and meet people that can help you, and it's pretty wonderful. So next year, the LAF turns 50 years old, and so it's a pretty remarkable moment. And I'll lead the LAF as president that year, and I'm so excited about the things that we're doing. I think for me, the most rewarding thing that's occurred since my tenure at the LAF has been the opportunity to call the Olmsted Scholars and let them know that they've been awarded the final prizes. It was so amazing. The students were so excited. They couldn't believe it. I did need to learn a little bit about how to contact people in this world. So phone calls didn't always work, and I was able to contact our finalist by text because she was in Brazil. And so it's really cool. I was super excited about that, and that's definitely been the highlight of my tenure at the LAF.
I had the honor to get to serve on a jury for the scholarship this year, and it was amazing to read the different things that the students are thinking about. You know, where they see the future, what they'd like to work on. It's exciting to see where it's going. Which follow up right with that. Where do you see the future of landscape architecture going?
Well, I that the future of architecture is global. I think one of the things we've done here in the U.S. for many decades is kind of kept within our bubble, but we have so much more to offer. Obviously, most people know that the world is small. It's definitely it seems flat sometimes. The degrees of separation are very, very shallow, and I think that's pretty amazing. And landscape architects have a lot to do in terms of supporting and really nurturing that aspect of our profession. I mean, it's global now. It's not just about your backyard, and I think that professionals need to be thinking that way because it's not going to change, and it's exciting. I think it's really exciting. So
for all of our students who are ready to get going on that endeavor and changing the world, a good place to start is an internship at EDSA.
Absolutely.
You guys have one of the great intern programs. You guys call it an experience, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Just at Ball State and saw a big poster for the internship experience. So what should a student do to take part in that or to get a job at your firm? What qualities and what things would help them move along in that process?
I think the number one thing you need as a prospective designer coming into EDSA is just a lot of passion and a great positive attitude. That'll take you a long way. We're really good at teaching here, so come with your best skills, but you're going to learn more really quickly. It's just is probably my gauge, but I've seen people here at EDSA with 1 year experience, and it seems like they are equivalent to someone with 3 years experience anywhere else, because you're just exposed to so much so quickly. And the great thing is that everyone here is very willing to share, and it's extremely humbling. It's something I learned quickly when I got here, was that you can walk right out of your studio into another studio and someone is willing to help, and just makes you a better designer. And I think that these are the things that are wonderful. We're always looking for people that are well-rounded, that have great communication skills, that are obviously thoughtful designers, that care about research, that care about everything that we do in terms of landscape architecture. I think the other thing that we always encourage people to do is to have an understanding of all the other professionals that affect our work and how we collaborate with them, because EDSA has been fortunate to be team leaders on many projects, and it's important to understand what a civil engineer does, what they really do, or even a structural engineer, or even an architect. You really need to have an understanding of their profession so you can speak as colleagues on the same level. And it surprises them. My background in architecture, and I actually worked for a structural engineer for several years, has been very beneficial. It's very funny to speak about beam sizes and door mullions and things of that nature in a meeting with a bunch of architects and engineers, and have them look at you like, wow, I'm surprised you even know that. And the fortunate thing is that most of them don't want to know anything about landscape architecture, so it makes us more than just a specialist in one thing. It makes us a generalist that has a special line of work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I read about a survey that was done recently. Not too recent, I think it was a little old, but said the number one and number two traits that firms are looking for new hires are written communication skills and verbal communication skills. I mean, you concur that being able to communicate what you want is almost as important as the graphic skills and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it definitely is. You're going to be exposed to interaction, and that's just something you can't take for granted. You have to be able to explain your ideas to a client. You have to be able to work with a team. I know many of you emerging professionals remember those group projects where a few people were carrying a load, and you had a couple of theirs kind of showing up every once in a while, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, you need to make sure that whatever happens, you're developing something that's going to be great for everybody. So, just be prepared to work in teams. Be prepared.
And talking about those drawing skills, what do you think, hand drawing or computer graphics? What's the way to go?
All right, so this is one of my pet peeves. I just believe that hand graphics is number one, and I think it always will be for several reasons. The most important reason is that to be a designer, to be a really, really good designer, you really need to be able to draw. It's kind of one of those basic elements of design. And when you draw, it's unbelievable how much you learn about what you're designing through your hand. The hand-eye coordination and the amount of brain power that goes into telling your hand what to do is so unbelievable. Keystrokes are cool, but it doesn't allow you to really get a full picture of it. So when I was in art school, we had this debate many occasions about, is a photographer an artist? And I had a few professors that really were adamantly against photography in the sense that they didn't feel it was truly art. They felt it was photography. And I challenged that. I wasn't sure. And so we had a lot of conversation about it and realized that, a painter or someone that's drawing by hand learns so much more about that subject because they take a little bit more time, to study that subject. Photographer can take an amazing photograph, but it's a split second. So that image is in and that image is gone, and then it's either mounted or it's in digital form. So it's very intriguing. I think that the training of an architect or a landscape architect or a graphic designer should be rooted in design, should be rooted in hand graphics. Now, computer graphics, what they do is they bring something to the table that hand graphics can't do. And I think that if you can utilize both tools and master them, you are a completely well-rounded designer. You're doing it all. But there's nothing like being in front of a client or being in front of a friend that doesn't understand your idea and being able to draw it right in front of them. It's pretty remarkable.
How do you see technology or advances in materials, carbon fibers, anything affect either the way that landscape architects will do their job or the things that they'll be putting into their projects? Is there anything you see changing the way things are done?
Yeah, actually, what's great about technology and growth in, advances in materials is that it allows us to try new things. And I think that's one of those things you have to really take advantage of and test and study. And, so many times you see landscape architects and designers that work with kind of a bag of tricks. It's the same thing they've done over and over and over again because they know it works. They tried it once, they tested it a few times, they know it works. But if we're going to advance our minds and do things that are just a little bit different that allow you to really learn, you got to try new things. So I think that's fantastic, and that's why I definitely embrace advances in materials and the types of things that we can do. Right now, we're working with Catherine Gustafson on a project in West Palm Beach, and the thing I love about their firm is that they really get into the details. I mean, they really understand materials. When I visited their office in Seattle, they had a whole wall, organized very carefully of materials, things they've tried before, things they hadn't tried before, and they were pulling things off the shelf and testing them out and turning around and putting water on pavers, things that we all do, but sometimes we take for granted. I was just intrigued about how organized they were about it and how passionate they were about it. I mean, the entire team there. I mean, they really get design. And I was fortunate enough to visit the Gates Foundation project that they completed, and you could see it. You could see all these details. I mean, it was like, okay, now I understand these guys and what they're doing. I mean, they're really elevating our profession. I think that we all should be doing the same thing, and it's just wonderful.
For those viewers interested in the work of Gustafson Guthrie Nichols, stay tuned for a special announcement about next month's Ask Me Anything coming soon, because I think you'll enjoy that. We do have another question from Hillary Hansel. She said, as someone who works in an office that is one single studio, how do the different studios in your office function? Are they focused on different practice areas, or are they centered around a lead principal? What benefits and challenges do they possess?
Ooh. That question is asked, and it is a question. So we're very unique. There are not a lot of firms that have multiple studios. Many firms have a planning division, a landscape architecture division, and maybe even a civil division, depending on what type of company it is. Ed, many years ago, formulated this model of design studios. His father was an architect, but his firm was a hierarchical sort of scenario. He was the guy. So if you wanted anything done, you had to go to the guy, EDS, to get anything done. So it's kind of a bottleneck approach. And then there are other firms that have several principals, but then under the principals, there's just a group of designers. And any principal can work with any designer, and they kind of interchange. And I'm sure many times they find their favorites. Our design studios are very different in the aspect that they are several little boutique small offices. Most LA firms are 1 to 2, maybe 3 to 4 people. Our studios range from 6 to 12, sometimes as much as 14 or 15. But that magic number of 12 is kind of based on this multiple of 6. When you reach a point where you have 12 people in the studio, usually split the studio so that you can create opportunities for others, which I think is fantastic. It doesn't pigeonhole anyone. It gives you a chance to do anything you want to do. And so the studios are led by principals. The principals essentially build those internal businesses under the umbrella of EDSA, and we work as partners and colleagues. Right now, currently, there are 3 studios working on a project in Dubai. So if it's a large project, we'll team up. If it's a small project, usually a studio can handle it. Sometimes you have an experience that another studio needs, so we'll pull you into that studio for that project. So there's never a dull moment here. I think the only downside to the studio model that EDSA possesses is that, at the end of the day, you can establish a sense of competition that can be damaging. So you got to be very, very careful to not pit studios against studios, because we learn so much from each other, and it's amazing when 2 studios work together. You learn a lot more than you do working by yourself as one studio. So we're really fortunate to have that resource. And it's not regionally based. It's not based on projects. Whoever your client is and what type of project you do with that client is what you do. So it's pretty flexible.
You mentioned earlier the importance when you were starting and knowing you were coming into your own about your network and using your network and growing from the people around you. How would you recommend to students and emerging professionals to build that network?
Great question. So people have friends, and good to work with your friends. That's one of the things I learned really early on. Because it's hard to work with people that you're not getting along with for whatever reason. So I found over the years, based on performance with certain projects, you team up and you collaborate with the people you like working with, and you love working with the clients you love working with. So you continue to work together. The network is super important. So for our design studio, usually on an assignment, we all come in together and we sort of figure out what we're going to do with that assignment. But typically, there are relationships. There are parallel relationships. There's a designer in one office that's working with a designer in our office. There's a project manager in another office that's working with a project manager in our office. And then there's a principal in one office that's working with a principal in our office. And so you have to sort of develop those relationships, because one day that designer, young designer, will be a principal. And so you will have that relationship for years. And the world is small, as we know. Our profession is small. and you end up bumping into people all over the place. So there's the one thing I learned at Georgia was Greg Coyle told many of us, don't burn any bridges, because one day you're going to need that person sitting right next to you. You might be submitting something to a government agency, and someone you knew from school is working there. So it's important to maintain relationships and be genuine, and enjoy people, and know more about them than just, what they're designing. Understand who they are as people. We've been fortunate enough to be friends with our clients, and that's very rewarding.
All right, we're going to ask one more question here, and this is kind of a pie-in-the-sky question for you. But if you were given a golden ticket to visit any landscape right now, you could instantly be transported to any landscape, where would you want to go?
That's a very challenging question, because there's so many places in the world I love. There's a place in Yemen called Satoro that's really, really cool. It's on the no-fly zone for you U.S. citizens, so the State Department doesn't like us going to Yemen. So I wouldn't suggest you go there, but you can look at from photos. But it's essentially on the tip of the Arabian Peninsula, and it's an unbelievable landscape with crazy trees and all sorts of things that you wouldn't imagine, sort of Dr. Seussage, and so it's very cool. Madagascar is another country that I think is pretty unique because of its biodiversity, and I've never been before. It's one of the places I've never been to. So if I had a golden ticket and could fly to Africa right now, I'm going to Madagascar.
All right, we're getting close to the top of the hour. I think we have another question coming in, but what's kind of in a closing kind of thing, what words of encouragement or what would you give or say to students and emerging professionals just to encourage them and help them move along in their path?
I would definitely to work hard. Work smart, though. Don't overdo it. I think that one of the things I learned many years ago was, you don't have to gild the lily. The lily is already beautiful, and there will always be another design opportunity. I think that we all stayed up real late at night in the studio and did a lot of things that we thought was really cool and allowed us to really design. But there's more to life than design. I think that you really need to be a person that's grounded and well-rounded. Someone that really gets the understanding of life and why it's important. Design is not an emergency, and sometimes you feel like it is because some client somewhere demands that they have to have something tomorrow, and sometimes you have to challenge that. We think it's important to go the extra mile when you can, and people appreciate that. But if people aren't appreciating your efforts, I wouldn't suggest you do it. I would suggest that you do what you can to make things wonderful in a manner that allows you to stay whole. And that's a challenge for designers because we love what we do. My wife always laughs at me because I'm snapping pictures of bricks and details of railings and stuff like that. So she's like, "Do you ever turn it off?" And fortunately, the times when I do turn it off, I realize that it's a beautiful world. There's so many great things. It's wonderful to spend time with your friends and family. I think that those are words that most designers don't always gravitate to. But I must say I'm very impressed with a lot of the emerging professionals that I've met recently. They seem a lot smarter than we were. They are taking the time to do things, take care of themselves. You really have one body, so take care of it. You're going to need it for a long time because we can do this until our 70s or 80s if we want to. So I just think it's important to just be cognizant of the bigger picture and do the right thing.
Excellent. And final question, where do you go to learn and improve yourself?
Wow. I think that's a stumper. There isn't any specific place I go to learn and improve myself. I think that one of the things you must do as a human being is essentially take that time to improve yourself. My wife and I took some time recently to go away and basically just decompress, and it was great. And it allows you to take a little bit of time out of your daily grind. If I could figure out a way to do that every day, I think I will have solved all the world's problems. I think that it's something that's important. If you can step away, no matter where it is, whether it's under a hammock of oak trees or down by a lake, and just take that time, even if it's individual, take 10 minutes or an hour, whatever you can, to really just reflect and think and let your blood pressure, sort of settle into its right place. If you can do that as a person on a daily basis, I think you'll be very successful.
That is great advice. Definitely finding time to balance life and work.
Yeah,
absolutely. You're going to win there. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and Kona, thank you so very much for joining us and for sharing your wisdom and experience with all of the ASLA emerging professionals and students, and everyone who's watching. Thank you for joining us. This broadcast will be available on YouTube, so people can watch it for years to come and continue to learn from what we learned today. So thank you very much, Kona, once again, and we appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kona. Thanks, Kona. Bye.